Hi, I'm John David Berdahl, and I'm going to be speaking about the overlap between the conditions, because they are conditions in and of themselves, alexithymia and autism spectrum disorder. And I'm not going to speak about, how these diagnoses sort of began. Although alexithymia, that was, I think people started paying attention to that. That was really noticed in about the late 70s. And then autism much earlier than that. First thing, I was just talking about this sort of subject yesterday. And what I was talking about was this woman had so many questions for me about what alexithymia is. Okay, like I had told her it's emotional blindness or feeling aphasia to attempt to explain it to her. And I've got this Scientific American sort of article, and it does explain, or it does describe alexithymia as the inability to recognize emotions and their subtleties and textures. Okay, and being on the spectrum myself, I have found out that I do have that sort of additional condition or symptom of autism. And there is that overlap with me. And what does that mean? So intrinsically, okay, innately, I don't really know what feeling I'm feeling at any time, okay? And I don't really know how to describe that. It's really ineffable for me to describe that sort of thing. And I see people like being emotional, experiencing emotions, and it's like, what is that like? You know, to know that you're happy, or to know that you're sad, or to know that you're angry, and that you can express that in words, or that you can sense that, that emotional state. That's so very strange for me. So yeah, this woman had so many questions. Just yesterday, we were having dinner, and she had asked me, like, so do you ever feel satisfied with the work that you do? And it's like, I don't know how to, and I tell people, like, I teach too. Okay, I'm a teacher and I'm a presenter. Hi. And I did tell her, it's like, no, I tell students, and I guess audience members, that I don't know how to be bothered. I don't know how to mind things. Okay. And that's autism for me. This kind of really flat landscape, this flat emotional landscape that really I cannot put into words a lot of the time, although I try to. And that's something I'll bring up. Okay, like what treatments for alexithymia, some that I've, I guess, undergone, and some that can be considered too. And I suppose if anyone has any questions, go ahead and ask a question or something like that, apparently in a chat or something like that, or send me a message. I mean, I've got an email address or something like that. But anyway, so alexithymia is a condition in and of itself, okay? And so it can be separate. And in fact, it is separate from autism, but it also, yes, overlaps, or it could be considered a symptom of autism because of how the brain is processing some of the information. But it can also be tied to other sorts of conditions, not just that atypical sort of condition. Okay, and there's so many more. And it can be caused, by neurobiology. It can be caused by trauma, too. And so for me, it's just the chemistry. It's just the brain chemistry that I have. And so for a long time, like, some people would tell me, okay, to give you another example of like alexithymia for me and autism for me. And I'll talk about like the specific overlaps, okay? And how it is that one can look like the other. One condition can definitely look like the other, and how they do come together to really make things very challenging for individuals on the spectrum, or I guess neuroatypical individuals, and make things difficult for typical individuals, okay? And so, in fact, I'll just begin right there, because it's like, for me, when I was smaller or when I was younger, I went with the flow, okay, or I took the path of least resistance concerning expressing emotions or telling people how I was feeling, or something like that. So I would just quote what I saw in movies. I would quote what I saw in magazines. I would just mirror certain things, or I would adopt what was modeled for me. And I would say that I was sad because I understood the context of sad, but I didn't understand, again, the meaning of sad, like the feeling of sad, okay, the experience of sad. I probably ought to explain it that way. And so I knew, like, if someone had passed away or if there was a loss, that I was supposed to grieve or be sullen, or somber, but internally, that wasn't really going on. I actually couldn't describe to you what was going on. Probably a lot of confusion, a lot of uncertainty as to what it was, that I was supposed to be going through, and what it was that I was supposed to be communicating and expressing sometimes. But I was, and still am, very, very observant, and I can really pick up, and a lot of people on the spectrum can be this way too, observe, okay, this is what I'm supposed to give people right now. Very if then, okay, very logical. If this is going on, then I'm supposed to have this facial expression. If that is going on, I'm supposed to say then I'm supposed to say these words. And that's how it was for me for a long time. And some people, like, I still talk, or I do talk with some people who knew me before I was diagnosed with autism, and before I did start speaking about, like, the overlap of autism and alexithymia. And yeah, they would say, well, you would tell me you liked things, and you would tell me you loved things, and you told me you want this or want that, and you told me this made you happy or this made you sad. And it's like, well, it was more just, following cues, following signs, attempting to interpret sensory input in a normative way without really, again, having a diagnosis or having an understanding of what it was that was going on. So yeah, I just went along with things, and a lot of us do on the spectrum, and that really frustrates. For me, I don't know how to be frustrated, but it frustrates some people, that I suppose lack of connection that way. Typical connection, sure. Normative connection, sure. But yeah, to describe a little more about, like, alexithymia, and not just to talk about me. Let me get into the specifics of the overlap, okay? Because that's what I'm supposed to be talking about. But hopefully that gives you a sense too, or an idea of what it was like for me, getting to a point of where it's like, wow, really acknowledging, yes, autism spectrum disorder, and living with that condition, but also living with that additional sort of condition of not really knowing, not really understanding, not really comprehending perhaps what feeling I'm feeling, how I'm feeling it, and how to express it. So alexithymia can be described as difficulty, or aspects, right? Aspects of alexithymia can be difficulty identifying different types of feelings, limited understanding of what causes feelings, difficulty expressing feelings, difficulty recognizing facial cues in others. And gosh, there's a sort of overlap right there, concerning autism spectrum disorder and alexithymia. All right. Limited or rigid imagination, constricted style of thinking. I was just telling someone that some individuals on the spectrum, and who do exhibit alexithymia at the same time, can think in sort of like right angles, and everything. And by that, I mean, it's really rigid, their kind of thinking, and that kind of imagination or problem solving, or I guess processing. It's kind of not as fluid, not as open-minded as it could be otherwise. Yeah, so hypersensitive, or being hypersensitive to physical sensations, detached or tentative connection to others. Okay, and again, this is via Scientific American that I'm getting this, and I could have gone to like Merriam-Webster or some other, site or source for a kind of definition and description of that kind of condition, alexithymia. And so already you're probably noticing that it's like, yeah, where does one start or stop, and where does the other one begin? Alexithymia and autism spectrum disorder, especially concerning, right? Difficulty expressing feelings, or difficulty expressing oneself, difficulty recognizing facial cues in others. And now I guess we could get into some of the brain chemistry of all of this, but I do believe I'm not supposed to do that too much. So I'm not going to talk about the folds of the brain or lobes and whatnot, but suffice it to say that like what it is that like the cause, and so many people may give you so many different explanations of what the cause of autism is, or perhaps what the cause of alexithymia is, but there definitely is an overlap which does cause this kind of, as I had said, frustration, this sort of challenge for an individual to connect to another individual in perhaps a very meaningful and a very substantive way. Okay, and so other psychological disorders that are associated, that alexithymia can be associated with, yeah, there's autism and depression, schizophrenia, and then, yeah, trauma can be, gosh, a contributing factor to that really occurring. And so let me talk about some of the difficulties or the challenges, right? The challenges that I was just talking about. Like some people, to make it specific, some people ask me what I want, okay? And I have no idea how to want in a very relatable, I suppose, average sort of way. And this is something that I've run into with other individuals who are on the spectrum or who identify as being on the spectrum, okay? That there's this kind of, and that is kind of tied to initiative and also feelings. You know, yeah, I suppose want, desire, interest, fascination, right, is a sort of feeling, if not definitely a feeling for some people. And so, but for me, it's something that's missing. You know, it's a component that's definitely, or totally missing. And so I didn't know how to respond to that for a while. Like I would just say things, the first thing that kind of popped into this mind when being asked what I wanted. Like I would just look at things and be like, okay, that's what I want. You know, it was just so very arbitrary. And it was, I suppose, unintentional too. And so I couldn't really form really strong bonds with people. And that happens with us on the spectrum, and not to speak about every person on the spectrum or to overgeneralize, but that happens where it's kind of like, it seems as though you're being inconsiderate or you're being non-compliant. And I'm going to be speaking to a police department right after this. I'm going to be going to talk about, like, yeah, this sort of topic, but also like different levels of autism and what to do with an autistic individual, or how to, you know, assist or aid an autistic individual in a crisis situation, being a law enforcement officer. And so that's going to be great. That's going to go really, really well. But yeah, so it's really, so one can look inconsiderate, distant, aloof, non-compliant, as I had said. And so you're not really expressing as much as you could be expressing. Yeah, you're not really saying as much as you could be saying. I wasn't really saying too much of anything, even though I, you know, was speaking words. I wasn't telling people about me or about the ideas I was supposed to have, thoughts that I was supposed to have, or as I had said, the interests, right? I mentioned that word, interests or fascinations. And so now that I've been diagnosed, I was diagnosed at 30. Okay, I understand, yeah, context, but also meaning now. I get the meaning of feelings, even though I don't feel them in a typical way. And to describe that to other people, like, how is it that you can describe? I mean, yeah, I've just told you about like the factors or the elements of alexithymia. And I suppose with autism spectrum disorder, talking about some of those symptoms, and technically I was diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. Okay. And so, yeah, that means I'm very, very talkative, very loquacious. I suppose having a really distinct focus on language, concentration on types of words or sorts of words that are being said and how they're being said and when they're being said. But yeah, with autism spectrum disorder, you know, there are a variety of symptoms with that, and alexithymia, I'm sort of considering one of them. Others, colleagues that I have to consider alexithymia a symptom, even though, again, it is its own condition. Like these two can occur separate from one another, or, you know, at the same time, or yes, be associated or tied with one another. And so, yeah, talking about, oh gosh, now I'm looking at treatments, but I'll wait on that one. I was going to wait for treatments for alexithymia. But the symptoms of autism spectrum disorder, you know, like repetitive behavior, a really pronounced limitation, I suppose, when it comes to, yes, expressing oneself or spending time with others, or I guess associating or being social, or socializing, you know, or something like that. But golly, and it's just so huge. So I'll talk about again how I do describe alexithymia to some people, because like some people it just blows their minds. Like most parents, I'll be talking about this condition, or I guess this this facet, right, of living this sort of life, living a sort of autistic life, definitely, but living this sort of life where, yeah, feelings can be very elusive, right, and the words to describe feelings can be very elusive. And so, like parents and other individuals who are so very emotional, perhaps, or so very passionate, all right, it just blows their minds, or they are so very almost incredulous or disbelieving. There's some feelings for you, but they're so very incredulous or disbelieving. It's like, how can a person be that way? Like, how can you just be so like really only intellectual about something and not emotional about something? And again, there's that kind of what challenge and frustration in connecting with other people. And like in families, like when I just said, like parents minds are blown when I'm telling them about like their child not knowing what happy is in the same way that the parent knows what happy is or what joy is. Oh gosh, okay, so I was asked, like, how is it that I know I'm experiencing joy when I don't know what it feels like to be joyful, or something like that. Now that I'm of a certain age and have a certain amount of awareness or whatnot. And I had told this individual, okay, I'm going to be really figurative. Okay. And yeah, I am describing this overlap again for me, to give you examples of like what's autism and what's alexithymia. So I was offering this woman a description, this individual. I was offering this individual a description of joy, how I know I'm, or how I do explain feeling joy for me, okay? And thanks to having this, again, this really talkative and definitely a sort of savantish nature for myself. I have myself an eidetic memory. I can retain vast amounts of information after only briefly having seen or heard something or someone. And then I can really replicate something that or repeat, you know, immediately something that I've seen, and not so much like hearing a song and then playing the whole song on the piano, although I get close to that sometimes. But so that's how I'm really, really capable of talking about this sort of phenomenon. Let me call it that. Talking about this sort of phenomenon. And what is this phenomenon? Knowing I'm supposed to feel, but not knowing how to describe that feeling, while again this overlap is occurring, you know, of not being really well acquainted with socializing in a typical way. And I'll talk about that in a moment. But okay, so explaining joy for me. So how I explained this to this individual when being asked, like, how do you know that you're feeling joy, or how do you explain joy even though you don't know or you're not really accustomed to perhaps feeling it, experiencing it, and then explaining it, right, or communicating it. And so I explained it as if I was visually impaired, okay, and I am emotionally visibly impaired. So what I explained was, it's like there's the sunrise, okay, and you're asking me, or I'm supposed to be describing feeling or seeing the sunrise, or was about to say enduring the sunrise, but really taking it. There we go. Taking in the sunrise, even though I can't see it emotionally. So, or see it, figuratively. And so to describe joy without seeing joy, okay, or knowing joy in that way, that I cannot see that feeling or see that sunrise, if you get what I mean. And so at that time, in that moment, even though I cannot see, right, the sun rising on the horizon and all of those colors, all those brilliant colors, right, and that visual, I cannot see that. I cannot, with joy appearing in front of me or inside of me, around me. I can still tell that it's going on because of the warmth on the skin. Okay, I can still tell it's going on because of more activity, like with sunrise, the birds are chirping or something like that. And so my senses are kind of compensating for that lack, I guess, that I'm supposed to have, or I'm supposed to call it a lack. I do not consider it a lack. For myself, or on behalf of myself, I consider, again, there's overlap of alexithymia and autism spectrum disorder, a gift, definitely a gift, a blessing, because I am the only person having, the way they overlap for me and the way I've seen them overlap for others too. They are having their own, very specific, very respective experience in life, and that no one else is having. And that's the gift that I've been given. I am having a very specific and respective experience that, no one else is having. And so I can talk about that. I'm supposed to be very thankful that I can talk about it, and I can talk about it for hours if need be, but yeah, I can talk about it, and I can impart it, and I can illuminate, or I guess enlighten others in a very, very impactful sort of way, in a very affecting sort of way, and life-altering sort of way, which is really, I do believe, that's just about as glorious as the sunrise itself, or that's supposed to allow me to be very joyful. Okay. Yeah. Gosh, and I ought to describe a little bit, or talk a little bit more about some of the details about alexithymia, right? Some of the facts about it. So research suggests that approximately 8% of males and 2% of females experience alexithymia. And I hope you're really clear on what it is that I'm talking about when I talk about alexithymia, where there's a difficulty, in reacting and expressing and feeling and imagining, I guess I'll say, our emotional experience. Okay. And that's something that has thrown me totally for a loop. Again, I talked about challenges and difficulties and frustrations, right? And obstacles and hurdles to really accomplishing so much together, when it is that you don't have that sort of emotional frame of reference. And then concerning the overlap, right, of autism spectrum disorder, like with alexithymia, there we go. Yeah, and I've got, on Merriam-Webster, inability to identify and express or describe one's feelings. Okay, now imagine, so with the overlap, can you imagine how much that, I guess, inhibits or slows down one's recognition or one's relationship to identity? Because it's like, well, if you don't know how you feel, if you don't know how to express how you feel, just concerning that condition, alexithymia, it's like, if you don't know how it is that you're feeling, how you can feel, perhaps how you ought to feel, and how to read feelings, right? It makes it so very, it's like, well, who am I? And how am I supposed to be engaging something else or someone else? It can be very perplexing. Okay, it can be very confounding, for an individual, and then other individuals who are trying to, I guess, have a relationship with that individual or evaluate or assess, like, what is that individual's or that person's identity, so I know how it is that I'm supposed to have a relationship with that person. And so it's so incredibly complex. And then, you add autism spectrum disorder, on top of that or with that, and it just, it can severely, I was about to say prohibit, but inhibit, and curtail, right? Totally curtail, that kind of, that kind of sharing that ought to go on just between, I suppose strangers, but also human beings who are so very, here we go, fueled by, and here I'm looking up, there we go, Centers for Disease Control, there, and signs and symptoms. Okay, so I'm getting to be sort of specific with autism spectrum disorder, because when I described alexithymia, it sounds so much like autism spectrum disorder. But again, they are two different conditions. Like autism spectrum disorder, there's going to be different types of learning. Okay, where the differences? Let me point that out, where the differences in these two conditions are, and then I'm going to talk about like treatment for alexithymia, or for that symptom, if we ought to call it that, or for that overlap. Let's just say that treatment for that overlap with these conditions, or specifically with alexithymia. But like, what is the difference between alexithymia and autism spectrum disorder? Just so you know that. Autism spectrum disorder, there's going to be, with that condition, there's going to be problems with social communication and interaction, and restricted and repetitive behaviors or interests, and so I do exhibit that sort of thing, or I guess that sort of quality or attribute. I can be incredibly repetitive in this conversation, or I guess in this discussion, I've been pretty repetitive, but there are only so many words that we can say about certain topics, right? But I can do the same thing every day, day after day, and I don't know how to be bothered by that. Because alexithymia is there, but also that is how I interpret sensory input too. I will repeat the same action because my brain, as far as I found out, it experiences this kind of unreality with, and not so much disbelief, but this kind of refusal is pretty strong, and not really avoidance, but maybe disagreement with new information sometimes. Luckily, I've put in the work, and I've put in a lot of effort to wholly and completely overcome that sort of symptom, or those sorts of aspects of autism spectrum disorder. Like if something's new to me, I totally engage it, or I totally investigate it, or I explore it, in a very healthy, in a very sort of balanced sort of way, which is really great. So a difference, definitely. So it's like immediately right there, a difference between like alexithymia and autism spectrum disorder, is that, autism spectrum disorder it's a lot of people consider it a learning disorder, right? And so learning and moving and paying attention, how a person learns and moves and pays attention to things, I guess I'll say, to input, right, to information, to situations, or to events, is very, to say atypical, different, it totally is, from what other people perhaps are used to, or perhaps what other people expect. Whereas alexithymia, definitely, again, is that sort of emotional blindness. It's that, golly, and I'm being very careful. I'm attempting to be pretty sensitive here, because like to say that it's a problem, I do believe it's not. I think it's just something that hasn't been totally or a setback, to call it a setback. I disagree with that. I disagree that what these diagnoses are setbacks. I do believe that they are just qualities, right, that people have, that they are factors in people's lives or perspectives, and just kind of modes of operation that, yeah, they're disorders, and a person is disordered, but a person can become more ordered, so I don't see them as setbacks. I see them as setups for comebacks, and that's me being sort of like inspirational right there. But yeah, so alexithymia, like autism spectrum disorder, okay, is going to be, yeah, there's going to be differences in learning, in moving, in paying attention. There's going to be restrictive or repetitive behavior, right? Or interpretation or understanding. And yeah, where alexithymia, again, that's going to be difficulty identifying different types of feelings. There, we're just really talking about feelings. And that's like the distinction between the two. That's the difference between these two sorts of conditions, or these two types of diagnoses, or gosh, here we go. Characteristics, these two types of characteristics, if we ought to call them that. And yeah, so where they overlap is this kind of region, or this space where, yeah, there's this repetitive behavior. There's this hindrance. Okay, there's this hindrance to understanding certain types of information, certain types of, and again, I'm attempting to be sensitive because each person's in a different spot, and concerning like levels of autism. Like for me, I'm considered a level 1. All right. I don't really need that much support. And when it comes to the levels of autism, we're talking about like 1, 2, 3, level 1, level 2, level 3, and how much support we need. And so I am attempting to be pretty, careful and delicate with some of this, but yeah, so to have these two conditions occurring simultaneously, all right, and just concerning autism spectrum disorder and alexithymia, not schizophrenia, not depression and alexithymia. So yeah, you've got that sort of a difference in interpreting, or difference in interpretation, right, of information, or of a situation, right, with the autistic brain. And then you've got that sort of unfamiliarity with feelings, so that it just takes it to another, oh gosh, I just said level, but it does take that sort of, that learning, and the lessons that you have to learn. And I guess I'm sort of getting into treatment, and what I've been, looks like 7:30. Oh, I've got 7:33 a.m. For me, it's morning where I'm at, and it's incredibly snowy. It's definitely winter here. It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas, to explain that, or to describe where I'm at for you. And it's really, really dark. I'm in the American Midwest. And so it gets dark at about 4 p.m., 4:30, well, 4:45 p.m. And it stays dark until about, well, I think it's still dark here at 7 a.m. Yeah, so it's still dark at about 7 a.m. So it probably gets light at about 8. Anyway, so yeah, I've got some treatments here for alexithymia, which would really be helpful. But, it's so very, I told you I'm being delicate, and it's so very complex because some people don't consider what I'm talking about bad, and I'm not saying that we have to, but it seems like, to have a certain type of diagnosis, you are led to believe by some professionals, right, by some specialists, that you're supposed to be fixed, okay, or that there is a problem that needs to be fixed or solved. And that's where I'm being careful here in some of the language, because some people, it becomes a part of a certain person's, or a certain type of person's identity. These, again, perspectives, as I had said, or characteristics, okay, or this overlap becomes a part of a person's identity, or to say that this, golly, not so much limitation, but maybe threshold, I could call it that, this different sort of threshold for interpretation, for recognition, right, and explanation is being transvaluated by an individual, and it becomes a sort of badge of honor. So that's why that's why you'll see me pausing a little bit and just, being really deliberate. Okay, so I'm attempting to be really deliberate in talking about how it is, and I'm moving on now because I've talked about, like, well, what is alexithymia? I've explained that. What is the overlap that I'm talking about between alexithymia and autism spectrum disorder? What is alexithymia in contrast to autism spectrum disorder? And there's a lot of details to sift through. There's a lot going on, but some of the frustrations, do allow me to speak to that a little bit, because I've said it can be frustrating, it can be challenging to connect to people when you don't know how it is that you're feeling, when you have to explain to people feelings in a very logical, in a very, again, intellectual, in a very cerebral, rational sort of way, when other people are having a very, I suppose, irrational experience, a very emotive experience, a very intuitive experience. Okay, definitely, and so some people believe that it's an act, like for me, okay, some people thought like that I'm putting on a show, or that I'm pretending that I don't understand. I don't know why any human being would pretend not to understand feelings, because there have been a lot of challenges. Some people won't be friends with me because they totally don't understand, how it is that I operate, or how it is that I function, or get through life events, okay? How it is that I navigate and negotiate certain types of life events. And other people will only have like limited contact with me. They've got pretty strict boundaries when it comes to me, because they feel destabilized by how very, again, intellectual I am, and how perhaps seemingly superficial I am to them. And I guess luckily, and I'm being personal again with this overlap with alexithymia and autism spectrum disorder, and I do hope I've been pretty clear about that, like what each of those conditions are, and how it is that they interact with one another, and how it is that they do, I was about to say collaborate, but how it is that they do kind of flow, or I guess add to each other's, complexities, definitely, but intricacies, okay? Intricacies, and very natures, how those two, really come together, really combine, really merge. Oh, that's this brain thinking of synonyms right there. That's me unmasking. But yeah, I do hope that I've been clear that alexithymia is this kind of lack of, again, there's that carefulness, limited, there we go, limited or rigid, right? And very different, and almost kind of disassociated type of identifying different types of feelings, and recognizing and expressing feelings in facial cues, right? This kind of constriction, and it really is a sort of constriction. So alexithymia is that, concerning feelings, and then autism spectrum disorder is definitely, a learning and moving and paying attention sort of disorder, right, or issue. Okay, but I'm getting into the frustrations now, and the slowing down, I'll say that, the slowing down of how intimate that people can be with one another, and how close people can be with one another, and how gosh, I was about to say related, but how, I suppose associated. I'll just stop there because I really need to get to the frustrations. But because what I deal with myself is I will describe a lot of this. I'll attempt to describe how it is that I'm supposed to be feeling, how it is that I've tried to be feeling. And I see children doing the same thing, who are at a certain level, again, concerning autism spectrum disorder and alexithymia. And, they're trying to have this bond, right? This, this tie, and it's here, bond. Here we go. It's so, just because you cannot explain how you're feeling doesn't mean that that feelings are important, and so fellowship, maybe affiliation, affiliation with a person, alliance, attachment. There we go. So so many children trying to have an attachment, so many children on the spectrum trying to have an attachment with the typical parent, and the typical parent trying to have an attachment with the child. And so this child is attempting to learn again and move and pay attention in a certain way, right? To become more ordered, or to become, or to, I guess, fit in or fill out, in a really typical way. But again, this overlap is slowing that down. It's definitely slowing that down, or as I had said, constricting the child or the individual, the person. And so I ought to offer some examples from my own life. Yeah, people ask me what I want, and luckily, I know now that I have a different perspective than them. I have autism spectrum disorder, so I know to learn things in a different way, to learn that I have alexithymia as well, that overlap is occurring. And so now I know to explain, like, oh, I don't know how to want things the way you do. I'll advocate a little bit when asked what I want. I'll say, I don't know how to want something like you do, but I can have, this sort of menu item if we're at a restaurant, or I can have this sort of product if we're shopping, just to get through, the, again, slowing down of, I guess, the attachment or link that I'm supposed to have with other people, and that's so very, that's so very human, and that's so very common, for friends, just for friends to go out and to go shopping, or for friends to talk about, hey, I like this movie, or this makes me satisfied. I began talking about that. This woman had asked me, are you ever satisfied? And I had to say no, and also, I suppose, yes. It's like, I don't know how to be satisfied or dissatisfied. I don't know how to be one or the other, in this, with the emotional landscape that I've got. Again, it's just really flat, the emotional landscape that I've got. It's really sunny all the time. It doesn't really change. Whereas for other people, their emotional landscapes have mountains, their emotional landscapes have rivers, their emotional landscapes have valleys, their emotional landscapes have so much to them, deserts, barren sort of areas, and really lush sort of areas. And I'm being figurative again, but it's like their emotional landscapes, have these sort of depressive or really melancholy sort of regions, or areas, and really sort of ecstatic, right, sort of areas. And for me, that's not really occurring. But thankfully, I recognize the overlap between autism spectrum disorder and alexithymia. Okay. And so, yeah, I don't know what I'm feeling ever. I don't know how to express that. I know how to be pretty verbal about it now, but to really communicate it non-verbally, sometimes that doesn't really occur for me, although I attempt to, and I am pretty successful at it now that I know that I'm supposed to do it, because I know I learn differently, And so that's how I've overcome that. And I guess I'm getting to treatments now, and it's what I got 45. I've been speaking for 45 minutes. So, and thank you so much for allowing me to speak on this subject. I'm attempting not to be too kind of clinical about it, and I'm succeeding in that. To not be too clinical about it, to be a little more broad about it, because golly, I could be speaking for 2 hours, 3 hours about how about all of the subtleties of this, and this sort of subject, the subtleties and the nuances, sure, and so much of the specifics, so much of the facts, and so much of the all of the studies that have been done and all the articles that have been written, all that. And I do believe I'm just supposed to offer someone a very basic kind of introduction to this, and so that, and I found too that when I offer people really scientific, right, and really methodical sort of examples, or sort of when I offer people that sort of information, right, when I offer them that, they get caught up, they get overwhelmed. Definitely they get overwhelmed by that type of information, by that sort of association, by that sort of connection, and I'm not supposed to do that. I'm not supposed to just say, like, this is what's going on in this part of the brain. This is what is going on in this part of the brain. I think what really ought to be talked about more is how human it can be, humanizing it, and making it sort of, I guess, normalizing it by being very basic and being sort of, I guess, kind of fun about it, and not so much silly. But I really ought to talk about treatments of alexithymia, and treatments for autism spectrum disorder vary, and that really depends on the person or the patient. But how is it that we can achieve, how is it that I did achieve a sort of emotional awareness or an emotional intelligence? I'm very thankful that I'm supposed to be very thankful, and I'm supposed to be very grateful. I'm supposed to be very honored and very blessed that I've had very patient people in this life that I've been living, very patient, I suppose, friends and confidants, very patient and very knowledgeable experts who have pointed me in certain directions, realizing that I learn things differently because I'm autistic. And I had to learn in a different way how it was that I was supposed to treat alexithymia. And so one of the ways that came up was journaling. That's a way to treat alexithymia. Expressive writing can be helpful in stretching a person's ability to detect emotions. Reading novels, okay, that can be a treatment for alexithymia. Like, the language of describing thoughts, feelings, moments, and experiences is literally found in novels. So that's a way to treat alexithymia. The expressive arts, or I guess the arts, and being expressive as an artist or as a maker. I myself am an art maker. I am a content creator. I'm an artist, fine artist, freelance artist. I'm an art educator. I'm also a life skills educator. Okay. And that has definitely helped me out. I must say that. I know I've helped others out in this kind of atypical sort of relationship or atypical association that I do have to feelings. How it is that I am very curious about them. And I hope that's an emotion. I do believe I exhibit that one. I mean, like, if that's what a mutually agreed upon emotional state, curiosity, as far as I know, it is. It's not just what a means to provide some sort of solution to something, or troubleshooting, some sort of, I don't know, conundrum, maybe. But yeah, so I'm very curious about feelings when people are working on art, or when people are attempting to cultivate, right, these type of, when I say life skills, what do I mean? Or these types of life skills, what do I mean? Executive functioning, soft skills when it comes to like work or just socializing, or really being a part of a community or a member of a community. So yeah, concerning the expressive arts, right, and how that can be a treatment for alexithymia. So yeah, hopefully that curiosity when it comes to feelings on the part of myself really does. I've seen it helps people out. They say it's kind of like, gosh, it's so refreshing to be around a person like me who asks, like, why does that make you happy? How do you know that you're happy? Or how do you know that you're content? Or how do you know, that you're fulfilled by what it is that you're working on or what it is that you're making or drawing? When I ask those questions, people say that it really allows them to be much more aware of how they're feeling, more in tune with how they're feeling, and much more privileged, to be feeling something. So yeah, taking a more formal approach with an acting, dance, art, music, or movement therapy class has been shown to help those with alexithymia recognize and externalize feelings. So there's that one. Yeah, and there are also like therapies that can be utilized to, right, or employed to treat, right, or to allow a person to become more emotionally expressive if alexithymia, right, is occurring. It's just, if autism spectrum disorder is occurring at the same time, again, if there's that overlap, then people are going to have to learn these things a little differently. How are they going to learn things a little differently? They may need these sorts of therapies or treatments explained to them in a certain way, with certain types of words. You have to be really precise sometimes with a person who's on the spectrum. Thankfully, again, like, people have thanked me for putting in the work, putting in the effort, putting in the time to make certain I know that I have a theory of mind. And that's another sort of discussion in and of itself, but that I have a theory of mind, that there are different minds, okay? That there are different beliefs, that there are different values, okay? But there's a precision that comes with that kind of different autistic mind that one really does need to be aware of. And I'm going to be explaining that to this police department that I'm going to go talk to in a little bit. So yeah, there's skill-based psychotherapy treatments. This is a short form of psychotherapy that aims to teach through skill building. Okay, so yeah, skill building therapies really help out with that. Dialectical behavioral therapy, cognitive mindfulness training, and short-term interpersonal therapy. Group psychotherapy, that's something that I actually did participate in as I was being diagnosed with autism, because I knew, and I guess I could tell the story, I could tell the life story that I have, but I've seen the positive effects of group therapy when it comes to the autistic brain, and yes, expressing oneself, to have something demonstrated in front of you, like to be in that group therapy setting and to have someone explain, gosh, I'm feeling this way because of like this experience, or because of this loss, or because of this uncertainty. Yeah, for me, that was that, I guess I ought to say, game changing or something like that. That really changed the rules when I was put in that sort of circle and I was told to pay attention to how someone was talking about something, why someone was talking about something, by a therapeutic professional or behavioral wellness sort of professional. That was really helpful. And I've seen, and that's what I provide now as an educator, not just group therapy. I don't just walk into classrooms and make it a group therapy session or something like that, but I will allow others to, I will definitely create moments, create opportunities where people can share what it is that's on their minds, or on their minds and in their hearts, and then I make certain that others are listening to, I don't force them, but it's kind of like, I'll get people to actively listen, and actively participate in something by asking questions like, did you hear what this person had said? And what do you think of what this person had said? And what do you think about how this person's feeling? And that, for me, group therapy concerning alexithymia, that was something that I picked up on, the benefit of that as a treatment, right? Hypnosis and relaxation training, that's something that can definitely, concerning like treatment for alexithymia as it's overlapping with autism spectrum disorder. Now, remember that one has to be pretty precise, with language or with approach, right? Or with, I guess, the attempt to, right, teach someone or to educate someone about this union, right? This union occurring between alexithymia and autism spectrum disorder. Yeah, and while most psychotherapies utilize talking as a way to reduce alexithymic symptoms, hypnosis and relaxation training look towards guided imagery and mentalizations to help enhance emotional understanding. Okay, and again, I've looked at a couple of websites while I've been talking. One of them, was Scientific American. There's an article there. The emotional blindness of alexithymia is what that one's called. And then, I looked at what is autism spectrum disorder at the CDC .gov, and then, Merriam-Webster. I was looking at Merriam-Webster, the definition of alexithymia. And so hopefully, and it just seems like I've scratched the surface of, again, this pairing, this coupling of these two separate conditions, and like which one occurs first. I'm not really certain which one causes the other, when they're connected with one another. That, it really depends on the individual. Was there one before the other, or which one manifested perhaps first? You'd have to probably talk with some early interventionists about that, but what I've definitely witnessed, what I've talked about, what I've experienced is that it's pretty simultaneous, and that alexithymia is really a symptom, or I was about to say concurrent aspect, factor, element of autism spectrum disorder. But the association is very, very sudden. It's very immediate. It's very instant. Okay, it's very instant. And to separate the two, it's great to separate the two, to know how it is that each one ought to be treated, right, respective of the other. But they both do contribute to this general, this kind of stereotypical, like most people think, this stereotypical sort of view or this image of a person with autism spectrum disorder, that, this person, is going to be, difficult. This person's going to be trouble. This person's going to be a project. This person's going to be, it's going to take a lot of effort, and it's going to take, a lot to probably, reach a person with autism spectrum disorder, because this person doesn't know how to socialize, right? This person doesn't know how to communicate or identify with others, or identify certain feelings. These two go hand in hand in perpetuating, right, that sort of image or that sort of idea or that sort of vision that people have of, an autistic person, a really uncommunicative, right, person. And one of the ways that we do communicate is expressing our feelings. And so that's what I let parents know, is that your child, the parents of autistic children, or parents of children who identify as, autistic or being on the spectrum, is that your child is not having the same emotional experience you are, and we ought to perhaps be prepared for the child not really, right, knowing, not, as I'd said, being acquainted with how it is that feelings can be verbalized, that feelings can be displayed, right, or how they can be signaled, right, or the signals that can be offered to others, so that so many people do understand. what it is that's occurring inside of that person's heart, right? Or inside of that person's soul, because that person is a person. And this overlap does slow things down, you know, and yeah, they are two very separate diagnoses, two very separate conditions, two very separate, I was about to say outlooks. Again, that makes it kind of intentional, but characteristics and qualities. They're two separate kinds of qualities. And it is good to know what the attributes, right, are of both of these, so that when they do occur at the same time, instantly, simultaneously, you know, and constantly, that we can treat one and treat the other, you know, very completely, very, very respectfully, you know, and very heartfully, you know, very heartfully, so that an individual can be an individual, can have a personality, can have wants, can have that full experience that human beings ought to really have. And so that's really all I had to say about, I mean, right now, about this sort of subject, right? The overlap. What was the title? There we go. Yeah, alexithymia and its high rate of overlap with autism spectrum disorder. Okay, and again, I've just scratched the surface of this sort of thing because I haven't gone into, yeah, the brain, the neurology of it. Okay, the science of it, I haven't gone into, because that can, yeah, be sort of overwhelming. And it's what we really ought to talk about when we talk about this is people, right? And yes, connecting. How can we better connect? Okay, so when we know that alexithymia, right, is an inability to identify and express one's own feelings, and autism spectrum disorder, you know, is a, right, restrictive and repetitive sort of condition or issue, and a learning issue, and a socializing issue, you know, that a person learns differently and socializes differently. Once we know the difference between the two, and then, you know, when they occur at the same time, or when there's an association between the two, you know, we can treat both. We can treat the person, and we can treat each other fairly and decently, with dignity, right? And hopefully a lot of acceptance and a lot of love and a lot of hope. So thank you very much for allowing me to talk about these, you know, these conditions and this subject. Thank you so much. Okay, and do have a great day.